This talk is possibly like that API we just saw, going to be truly random. I hope you enjoy that. I'm going to talk about various things, but the fundamental heart of this is APIs across ecosystems. And a little bit about me. So who am I? I'm Paul. I've been working open source for kind of about 20 years. I was in IBM as a senior technical staff member. And about 14 years ago, I helped set up WSO2, where I'm still the CTO 14 years later. It feels like a prison sentence. I could have been out by now. But never mind. I'm still enjoying what I'm doing. And any mathematicians in the room? I know there's at least one mathematician in the room here. Come on, there's got to be some more. I heard a talk from another one. Yeah, a few of you. So if you're a mathematician, you love this formula. This puts together all the main symbols of maths in one true formula. And when I was a kid, I just loved maths. I did maths at university. And why did I love it? Because it was so clean and simple and beautiful. And then I also love physics. So we all know this formula. It took Einstein quite a while. His first publication did not have that beautiful, clean formula in it. It took him a while to simplify it down to that, but it's really simple, isn't it? It's really straightforward. What I hated at science at school was biology. This is a biological formula. This is basically showing genetic modifications, and what the hell is going on there? I have no idea, right? I have absolutely no clue what that is about. But I've grown to love biology, right? I've grown to think biology is more relevant to us computer scientists than maths or physics. And why is that? Because it's the study of complex systems. And that's fundamentally what we do. We deal with complex systems. You've heard it all through this conference. You know, security, schema validation, which protocol to use, which RESTful patterns to use, which attributes you want for your APIs. This is all complexity. And ecosystems are complex, cooperating environments. And the definition of an ecosystem is the organisms and the environment working together. And that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about how we are creating ecosystems and how ecosystems should change the way we think about APIs. So it's my belief that APIs are the products of the 21st century. Right? This is how we build value, how we distribute value today. And as a result, maybe we should look back a little bit in history. So these are kind of the products of the 19th century. You know, someone cooking something by hand, right? And then in the 20th century, in 1929, a good Swedish example, Anna set up her bakery and started making beautiful biscuits. And they all look the same. They're all identical. They're fungible, they're reproducible, they're reliable. Fungible means you can swap one tin of biscuits for another and no one cares, assuming no one's dived in and eaten some of them already. And this is really important, is that APIs are reproducible, fungible, reliable. But let's go even further back. These are the Phoenicians. This is an ancient carving of Phoenicians, and they used to row these boats across the Mediterranean. And what they did was they revolutionized trade. So before the Phoenicians started trading across the whole of the Mediterranean, people, if you wanted a biscuit, you bought the biscuit from the person next to you, right? You got a tool from the person next to you, or a carpet, or some spices, and you just had what was available in direct point-to-point trade. But they enabled this idea that we could repackage and resell and transport items of value around the world, and therefore open up an ecosystem. And today, most APIs are still direct from producer to consumer. Most people are consuming the API directly from Shutterstock or Ring Central. But there are some interesting examples emerging where people are not doing that, where we start to get a flowering of intermediaries and commons. So this is an example this is a company and a setup that was built to create a marketplace of APIs. And one of the key aspects of IdeaBiz was it was about revenue sharing. So IdeaBiz basically allows people to build mobile APIs and mobile apps that use mobile wallets, mobile identity, and all sorts of other APIs. And by creating a shared marketplace of APIs, they onboarded 2,500 developers and created 3,500 apps in 18 months, which is pretty awesome, isn't it? And this kind of shared business model is something I'm seeing all over the place. So this is another telco industry example, and unfortunately I can't name the participants here, which is a shame. I've been hassling them to let me name them, but I haven't got permission yet. So what happens here is a company I work with called Applegate, I'm not meant to name them, but Applegate, live here in this hub. And they take APIs from multiple parties and they bundle them. And they resell those bundles to cell phone operators, to people like T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon. If you're in Europe, then 3, Orange, and so forth. Now they do that in Singapore, Malaysia, the Far East. So, and what happens here is they create a revenue sharing opportunity. So when the cell phone operator buys that bundle, they take a cut of the revenue and they pass some of it back to the provider of those original APIs. So they've built effectively a marketplace of APIs which allows revenue share. Now that's an example where it's not just point-to-point, but it gets more interesting because they're working with another hub provider in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia and that area, who also wants to sell these bundles of APIs. So they take the bundle of APIs and then they resell the whole bundle to the Middle East hub, who then resells it to the cell phone operators. Now you've got a 3-way revenue share. So this is what I mean. This is like the Phoenicians, right? They're starting to trade these APIs as fungible, resellable components that can be reused. And this is going to drastically change the whole way we think about the API economy, when it suddenly stops being point-to-point and we start to build these ecosystems. So to do that, both these examples use a marketplace. And a marketplace brings together API descriptions. It's like a portal, but with multiple parties involved in it. It brings together products, individual APIs, composed APIs from multiple parties, and allows external developers a single place they can come to find a bundle of APIs or different APIs from different providers. And this is another example of a marketplace. So Bank of New York Mellon is one of the oldest banks in the world, and they have built an API marketplace they call Nexen. And they've pulled together all the APIs that they had. They basically do asset management. So they manage $33 trillion of assets for various parties. And those parties want to know, how much are my assets worth today? So they call an API, and the API tells them. But why is this a marketplace? Because they are starting to allow their customers and partners to add APIs into this API marketplace. So it's no longer just APIs from the Bank of New York Nexen, from Mellon. And I think this is an amazing statement from their director, Jonathan Pearl. He said, we want to blur the lines between our technology and our customers. So this is where we start to create not just point-to-point APIs from producer to consumer, but we're starting to share and bundle APIs that cross back and forth between those producer and consumers to create an ecosystem. And this is really cool, I think. This is really changing my view of what we can do. And what is this doing? This is creating a richer, deeper experience for their partners and customers, and it's creating a stronger business relationship that they can take forward. This is all based on, I just put this up today because it was an exciting day. 3 hours ago, actually it was about 6 hours ago, we released the release candidate of our open source the next version of our software. And it has some specific features in there to really help this. It has a brand new portal that's much simpler, based on React.js. It has a designer that allows you to create these bundles of APIs from different parties, and some other cool things like GraphQL support and a Kubernetes operator. So please come by our booth and check that out. But I want to talk about how ecosystems also affect us within our organization. How can you use a marketplace to create an ecosystem within your organization and use APIs there as well? So the Agile Manifesto says that the best architectures, requirements, and designs come from self-organizing teams. Right? So that's an important idea in agility, that we have these self-organizing teams. This is an example from biology of self-organization. The colors and the patterns on the back of the butterfly all come from the same type of cell. So basically, these cells grow, and as they grow, they self-organize into these patterns. It's pretty amazing. And so that's the kind of thing we're excited to do. But we want to create an ecosystem within our organization. And too often, we don't have that. Too often, we've got a center of excellence that owns everything. Too often, we've got waterfall processes. We've got departments fighting over stuff. We've got all kinds of challenges to say this is really a cooperative ecosystem inside our organization. Uber started doing microservices back in 2016, and they said they had a few hundred back then. Earlier this year, they published this graph of their microservices. Wow. That's obviously a few thousand. Now, they didn't explain quite what was going on in here, but and I don't know, maybe they have a fantastic technical organization and it's all brilliant, but if I was the CIO, I would look at that and say, well, that's self-organized into something, but it's not beautiful. And what is it that scares me? It's not the number of APIs here. The number of blobs on this chart does not matter. The number is fine. It's the lines between them, right? It's the massive interconnectedness between everything, which is great. That means everybody's using everything. But how on earth do you manage that? How on earth do you bring some order to that? So I'm going to say that I think that self-organization needs boundaries. Right? Self-organization needs you to have boundaries in place, right? I have a team, and they're pretty self-organized. They're building a new project. And if they said to me tomorrow, actually, Paul, we've decided we want to set up a coffee shop and become baristas, that would not be the level of self-organization that I'd be willing to accept, right? So boundaries are important. And let's go to another biological metaphor here. These are cells. And what do I notice when I look at these cells? I notice the cell boundary. It's the cell wall that is of interest here. And cells are the basic functional unit of everything that's living, both flora and fauna. Everything is organized into cells. And fundamentally, that's what stops us being just a pile of goo on the floor, right? A big pile of goo, because without these cell walls, we wouldn't have organization. And in my mind, this reminds me of bounded contexts and aggregates from domain-driven design. So I think we need to have, in the microservices and API world, we need to have bounded contexts between teams that clearly define what our shared experience is. And the important part of a bounded context is you don't share everything. You only share certain aspects. And so about 2 years ago, one of my colleagues and I wrote a paper called the Cell-Based Reference Architecture, taking this biological metaphor and applying it to APIs and microservices and serverless to say, what would it mean to say, take the concepts of bounded context and apply them into that world? And it's really interesting. So what does a cell wall look like? It has these things here, which are called membranes, and these are called transmembrane receptors and transmembrane signaling. So what happens here is a protein floats along the outside and it binds to this receptor, and that causes a signal to pass through the membrane and causes another protein to bind or be released on the other side. So what do I think that is? Well, that looks like a micro gateway to me, right? That looks like an event-driven architecture with a micro gateway, right? We have events hit the outside of the micro gateway, and some of those events are ignored or thrown away, and some of them are stopped by security rules or throttling, and some of them are allowed through to cause action to happen inside. So we need micro gateways or gateways to create these boundaries around a bounded context, around a cell, to enable us to be more structured in how we build out our internal architecture. And now once we have those micro gateways, now we want to have a marketplace where we can publish those APIs and where we can share them. And what's really important is that this needs to be decentralized. So the internal teams who create their cell and create the cell gateway and publish the interface should not have to have any dependence on each other. So the fact of using an API marketplace in the same way that we do for external parties, where multiple parties can publish into it independently, gives us that decentralization and efficiency. Now, we had a lot of people say to us, Paul, well, I like that cell architecture you've talked about, but how do I implement it? And so we've built a system on top of Kubernetes called Celery that goes some way to doing this. This is still an early project. It's at 0.4 release we just did a couple of weeks ago. But this allows you to aggregate those cells and deploy them into Kubernetes and manage them as units and publish those APIs into a public marketplace. So please take a look. And then I want to leave you with a final question, which is, can we go beyond just marketplaces? So the marketplace is important to allow us to publish these, but there's more to the API economy than just the marketplace. And so I would like to see us build decentralized billing. So what does that mean? That means that we could share those revenues across that three-way multi-party split in a structured way that is completely fair to everyone. Decentralized gateways, what would that mean? That would mean that I could use different gateways across the organization or across a system, and they could all talk to a centralized marketplace for subscription, for key management. We need decentralized identity to do that. Now, we're about to have Keith talk about, from Okta talk. He's an expert in federated identity, so we have those systems as well. And that helps us build this idea of decentralized marketplaces. And I've been working with a team who's been using a blockchain to create this idea of a set of decentralized marketplaces with decentralized billing, decentralized identity, and decentralized gateways, and to try and create a specification for what that would look like, not just for my software, but for anyone's gateway, marketplace, anyone's API toolkit in a standard way. And so if anyone's interested in contributing to that, it's still early. We plan to put up a GitHub page soon. But if you're interested in contributing or participating in that activity, please come talk to me, because I'd be really interested. Because, of course, this needs to be an ecosystem in this space as well. You know, we need multiple parties. And I want to leave you with this thought that ecosystems that have high biodiversity are highly productive. So what does that mean to us? It means that we should enable different types of APIs. We should enable different teams to act independently. We should enable business models that don't assume everyone's going to do it our way, but allow different parties to publish APIs into our marketplaces in a shared space. And I think that is going to create the next generation and the next epoch of the API economy, when we have these ecosystems that are truly rich, truly decentralized, and allow us to create that kind of biodiversity that you see in nature. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much. If anyone's interested, we are running some workshops on APIs and identity in Sweden. So I thought I'd better mention that while I'm here. And there are my contact details if anybody wants to talk to me afterwards. Thank you very much.
All right, we're running a couple of minutes ahead. If someone would like to ask Paul a question on his presentation. Yep, back here. My good question, friend.
I have a question, actually.
Go ahead.
Is it possible to have a decentralized API gateway?
So what I mean by a decentralized API gateway is that instead of having a single API gateway that handles all the APIs for a marketplace or for a portal, that you can split out multiple API gateways in different groups, different teams can run them, and you can aggregate all of that into a single experience for the user. So the user can come along and subscribe to APIs no matter which gateway they live in. So it's not decentralizing the gateway for a particular API, but it's decentralizing the API ecosystem across multiple gateways. And we do that already today, yes, with multiple customers.
Super. If you have more on that, also Liam touched on that. Any other final questions before we move on? All right.
All right, thank you very much indeed.